In the immediate wake of 9/11, confronted with the immense death and destruction directly caused by the attacks, few were in a mindset to contemplate the impact it would have on air quality, or the impact that air quality would have on first responders' lives. These factors would nonetheless prove to be devastating to many lives. The collapse of the Twin Towers unleashed a cascade of toxic dust so immense that it could be seen from space. Pulverized glass and building materials made up the bulk of the cloud, and these are harmful enough on their own when inhaled. In addition, the dust contained the highly carcinogenic insulation material asbestos, along with trace levels of lead and mercury. All in all, in excess of 2,000 contaminants blanketed Ground Zero as a result of the attacks. It was in this poisonous environment that the rescue workers labored for weeks, sometimes for as much as 12 hours a day, with insufficient respiratory protection. To compound the problem, they were deceptively assured by their mayor and the Environmental Protection Agency that the air was not a serious hazard to their health. In 2003, it was reported that the White House pressured the EPA to downplay the dangers posed by the situation, which the EPA then did. Like the EPA, Mayor Giuliani made numerous statements to the effect that the air was fundamentally safe to breathe. Not surprisingly, as the years go by, more and more evidence surfaces of the damage done. In 2007, the New York Post reported that a study of 471 police officers found that many respiratory symptoms, such as shortness of breath, coughing up phlegm, and wheezing, skyrocketed in the year and a half following 9/11. The closer the proximity of these officers to Ground Zero, the worse the problems. The same article mentioned a medical analysis that found that FDNY firefighters exposed to the air at Ground Zero lost the equivalent of 12 years of lung function. A Mount Sinai study found that between 2002 and 2004, 70% of rescue and cleanup workers reported respiratory problems. In May of 2006, the New York Times reported that in the 2 years after 9/11, a lung scarring disease called sarcoidosis rose to 5 times the expected rate among firefighters. Lung scarring can be fatal and has caused at least 2 deaths among 9/11 workers. It can also be debilitating and costly. Cancer is another problem. In 2006, the Village Voice reported that 75 recovery workers at Ground Zero had been diagnosed with blood cell cancers that experts said were likely caused by their 9/11 exposure. A New York Department of Health study released in 2008 found 55 cancer deaths among rescue and recovery workers, with the majority of the cancer developing after exposure. This includes 19 lung cancer deaths. In early 2007, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health estimated the total cost of treatment for Ground Zero workers at $20 million per month. A Mount Sinai study found that 40% of the first responders it was monitoring did not have health insurance. Obviously, the long-term costs of these chronic diseases are prohibitive for individuals. Those who sacrificed more than even they knew at the time to help others on 9/11 now need help themselves.
Human dignity is the inherent dignity and worth in humans, due to our being created in the likeness and image of God. Since God honored us by making us in His image, our lives are precious, from conception until death. In our current culture, people tend to focus merely on the death aspect of people's lives. After the 9/11 attack, many innocent lives were lost, and we should pay respects and honor them, as we lost many precious lives. Yet once we have moved on from mourning, we have come to overlook those who survived. So many who helped us save lives are now suffering from diseases they attained while performing their duties. We invest so much time and money in commemorating the deaths of victims, but shouldn't we celebrate the lives of those who survived? The rescue workers afflicted with the illnesses are not receiving the medical care necessary and are trying to support their families off disability paychecks. We must respect these heroes that can still be saved, as they are humans, and as humans they have an inherent dignity and worth. All workers retain basic rights: the right to productive work, to a decent and fair wage, to forming unions, and to subsidiary care. If a worker is injured on a job, he should receive workers' compensation to last him till he recovers. If it was an accident, then the employer should take methods to prevent future accidents from occurring. In this case, these rescue workers came to do their jobs and save lives. They were improperly equipped by the city and were told that the air was safe to breathe. Now ill, they receive only minimal workers' compensation. While medication to postpone their continually deteriorating health is provided by Injured Workers Pharmacy, not only could the thousands of cases have been preventable, but if there were enough funding and care given to these workers early enough, hundreds of noble lives could have been saved. The workers in the rescue had been overlooked because they were guilty of not having died in the terrorist attack. Now that they are dying because of it, we must look to help those whom we still can. We as God's creation must remember that we are all one human family. We are all our brothers and sisters' keepers. Solidarity is a conscious decision to form a community with the one who is suffering. We are called by our faith to love our neighbors, especially those in need. The ill rescue workers are in need of help from their diseases and their inability to support themselves or their family. We must not forget about them. We must care for them as we would if we were their brothers and sisters. For all people on earth, we must recognize each other's needs and commit ourselves to action, to make a positive change in their life, or if unable, raise their spirits through compassion. To give fosters one's own growth. The workers who survive need our compassion and love, not only as heroes, but as our own brothers and sisters.
Nearly a decade after the disaster, there are still countless 9/11 workers and volunteers whose needs and problems have not been addressed and simply brushed aside. The deadline for all to register for workers' compensation is drawing near, which is why we need to be all the more steadfast in our actions. While serving as a senator, Hillary Clinton first helped to introduce legislation by reopening the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund, designed to financially compensate all those who were affected. So far, this fund has provided more than $7 billion to families of the victims. And now, as one of its first promises, President Obama has renewed the pledge to help those victims, and with the aid of Congress is making great strides in keeping that promise. The World Trade Center Centers of Excellence, a federally funded program, provides monitoring and treatment, including medication, in the New York City area for 9/11 related illnesses, with no out-of-pocket costs to patients. Thousands of rescue and recovery workers rushed to New York City's aid in the days and weeks after 9/11. They came from every state and nearly every congressional district in the country. The National Responder Health Program helps to monitor and provide further treatment to those beyond the New York and New Jersey metropolitan area. At least 100,000 people who performed any rescue, recovery, or cleanup are eligible to register with the New York State Workers' Compensation Board under law enacted by the state legislation in 2006. According to the New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health, about 40,000 have registered thus far. However, for many of these victims, even getting started in the process can be difficult. They say it can take months just to get a hearing, and those who are lucky enough to get a hearing scheduled unfortunately say they aren't told exactly what they need to do to prepare, resulting in further delays in their case. Simply being confused has been the main problem for many of these victims. They aren't aware of the proper procedures that need to be followed and forms to be filled out in order to register. New York City has already enlisted the help of various nonprofit organizations that have been actively trying to reach out to as many victims as possible. They have created fact sheets outlining detailed information regarding required documents for registration and eligibility. Even those workers who are not currently sick are eligible to register should they develop a 9/11 related illness in the future. In the aftermath of the 9/11 disasters, thousands of workers and volunteers offered their assistance in any way they can. And without any regard for their own health and safety, these people marched into a virtual war zone. And for their selfless efforts, they have suffered tremendously. Catholic tradition teaches us that we are all one human family and we are responsible for the well-being of one another. Now it's our turn to show that their actions will not go unnoticed, their voices will not go unheard, and they will not be forgotten.